10 time zones away. So these things don't cost very much when you're doing things collaboratively over distances. So then I wanted to kind of finish up here. Didn't know how long this was going to take, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Institute for Soldier Nanotechnology, which is one of the fun things I was allowed to do in my life so far. And I kind of think of it as a sandbox. There was a request for proposal from the Army Research Office in September 2001 it came out. If you remember what also happened in September 2001, it was a very interesting time to be writing a proposal. It was due in January 2002. They had a site visit at the end of January. The proposal was due, and 4 weeks later they were on campus. And in March they announced that we had won this $50 million center called the Institute for Soldier Nanotechnologies. MIT put together 44,000 square feet of laboratory space, and at the time we had about 40 faculty from 10 departments. It's increased, and there's 60 now from 12 departments. That's a lot of people playing in that sandbox. We've hired 14 staff, and there's industry partners, Raytheon on the big side, DuPont, and on the small side, startups that a 5-year-old startup that's doing something with 20 employees. There's 6-1 money is it's around 11 million a year now in 6-1. There's also 6-2 money that was put in there by the Army for transitions. Because if you want things to get out of an academic lab into the real world and have impact on the Army, there's all these technology readiness levels. Where's Frank? He's a TRL guy for sure. And I didn't know what a TRL was back in 2001. Now I sort of know, and I know that universities are TRL 1 at best, right? But you really need to have something that is technology readiness levels, sort of maturity of the technology. How ready are you actually to have something that you trust, it's reliable, it's a product that can get out there? So we've worked a lot with the Army and with industry in order to make transitions. And I want to tell you about one that I think is pretty spectacular. So the ISN has a mission, and the mission is to support that young fellow there and our men and women, the war fighters. But also, everything you do for warfighters in terms of survivability translates into protection for police, fire, and first responders. So, second quiz question. What's the most dangerous occupation in the world? And time's up. And who would know? Who would know the most dangerous occupation in the world? The insurance companies, right? Offshore oil rigs. Blast, fire, falling, drowning. More dangerous than anything else. And so if you think about industry, if you're out there in an oil rig, what do you got to protect from? All the bad stuff that pretty much, so far nobody's shooting bullets out there, but everything else, fires and chemical explosions. So this guy's 173rd Airborne, who dropped people into northern Iraq because the Turks wouldn't let I think it was the 4th Army was supposed to come down from Turkey and go into northern Iraq, and negotiations didn't go well, so they did the first substantial air drop since Korean War, and 173rd. So this guy's probably 20 years old. He's probably as good as any of your Gator football players in terms of his conditioning, and he's taking a break because he's carrying about 100 pounds on his back. And we're asking these folks to, now in Afghanistan, take that kind of load up and down mountains. And oh, by the way, at any particular time, you're ready to fight the bad guy. And so trying to shrink that volume and lighten the load with nanotechnology was what the ISN was all about. So lots and lots of projects, and nothing on lethality. We're all about protection and survivability, so we're not developing weapons. No classified research. This is on campus, and kids from China and India and Canada, where else? France. We even let French students work on this stuff. And so here's a project that Tim Swagger, a good friend over in chemistry, he and I he was the associate director and I was the director of the institute. So one of the things that was of interest was to detect TNT, still is. And Tim designed this molecule, so I got to be a professor here for a few minutes. So this is a conjugated polymer molecule, and Tim designed this molecule because this guy over here, trinitrotoluene, better known as TNT, this guy interacts with the electro-optical states in this molecule and does magic things. So that conjugated polymer, now, okay, so I had to give this briefing. I used to give seminars, but when I was directing the ISN, I gave briefings to generals. And generals are smart people, but they usually don't understand, detailed quantum mechanical things. So I talked about holiday lights and how this works. So imagine if I have this thing as a monomer, and I have 10,000 of them in a jar. And a TNT molecule will come in and will quench the fluorescence. This molecule naturally fluoresces in the green. So if I hit it with UV light, this Swire molecule will give off green photons. But if TNT's vapor is around, that TNT vapor interacts with that conjugated polymer, let's say it's a monomer, and it will quench the fluorescence. So if I had 10,000 of these molecules, these individual sensors, just one of these monomers, and I had one TNT molecule come in, it would quench the fluorescence of one of those 10,000 molecules. So this jar of fluorescence would go from 10,000 to 9,999. Signal would drop, but hardly at all. Now the clever thing that Swagger did was he made these things into holiday lights. And that exciton that gets created when the UV photon comes in migrates along the backbone. And it's just like having Christmas lights in a series. When one light is out, they all are out. So one single molecule of TNT will quench the fluorescence from about 10,000 monomers. So now, one TNT molecule comes in, and instead of having 10,000 green photons, you have 0. And that's easy to detect. The other thing is, it's very sensitive. Because usually when you make a great sensor, it senses everything. So this is pretty good. This actually will work under JP8. You can put it in diesel fuel, and gasoline, and alcohol. Doesn't affect it, because the cavity here, this is, of course, the wrong way to draw this thing. Look at it 3D. The way that molecule fits in there and how those energy levels interact has been designed so that TNT and dinitrotoluene work beautifully. C4 doesn't detect C4. Different molecules, so you have to come up with that. So this is the sort of 6-1 breakthrough discovery, great stuff. So what happens next? Well, there's a company called Nomadics from Stillwater, Oklahoma. They're interested in licensing this thing. And this is about the size of a remote control. And the sensor is a capillary tube right there, which is, this is the cartoon of it. There's a glass capillary tube with a hole in the middle, and that green fluorescent polymer is a nano-thin film on the inside of that tube. Contaminated air is pumped through that tube. You UV irradiate the green fluorescent polymer, and it's glowing green. The light is wave guided down the capillary, goes through a filter to a detector, and the soldier sees that there's green light until there's a TNT vapor, and then the green light goes away, and he either hears it, sees a meter, or it vibrates. So it's a detector, handheld, user-friendly, and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty good. So you got this company that's interested in that. Now they want to sell it to the Army, and want to make it better. So that was a chemistry invention, but the ISN, remember, it's a sandbox. So we got double E's playing in the sandbox. A guy named Vladimir Bulovic. So he just got tenure this year. Vladimir is out of Steve Forrest's group at Princeton. Forrest is now at BP Research at Michigan. And so we were quenching spontaneous emission. Pretty good, 10,000 to 0. How about quenching lazy?